Hello everybody, welcome back to CNS Corvettes in beautiful sunny Sarasota, Florida. This is your Corvette buddy Lyle, back to talk to you about more interesting, exciting, useful, and hopefully maybe mildly entertaining stuff about Corvettes. Now, if this is the first time you're visiting our channel, please just like the video if you enjoy the content, and if you want to hear more from us, hit the subscribe button and the the little red notification bell so that you're made aware when we release new content. We normally upload at least one video a week, and we really do try to stick to that. When I can do more than one, I will. Now, today's video is going to get into something that is what many people would consider extremely basic knowledge, but it might not be a bad idea for you to watch it anyway, even if you're a mechanic, because A, you may have something to add or disagree with in the comments below, or you may learn something that you thought you knew but you didn't. So let's get into it right now. You know, one of the things that Steve, the owner of CNS Corvettes, and I were talking about the other day is the number of calls we get and emails we get asking extremely basic maintenance questions. Even with all the videos we've done, even with all the information available out there on the internet, we still get people calling in about, how do I read the dipstick on my oil dipstick? How do I do this? How do I do that? Things that we assumed A, we'd covered, or B, that people just knew, but evidently they don't. And Steve was talking to me this morning and recommended that I do a video regarding some of the basics that you want to do once a month. And as Steve has been a lifelong private pilot, he called it the Preflight. Now, if you aren't used to aviation and you're not a pilot yourself, you may not know that every time a private aircraft, and let's face it, hopefully all of the commercial jets you're flying are going through a series of checks every time they're ready to leave the ground. And that is exterior and interior gauges, fuel levels, all kinds of stuff that gets checked before that airplane is, quote, ready to hit the runway, okay? So what we're gonna talk about today is how to pre-flight your Corvette. And actually this will apply to just about any vehicle, but since we're a Corvette shop and we love Corvettes, we're going to focus a little more on Corvette specifics. So first and foremost, as I preach in everything I talk about, fluids, 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 fluids. Most important thing you can do if you want to get 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles out of your Corvette, fluids all the time. Keep an eye on them, refresh them as needed, use the right things, okay? So let's go through some basics on fluid checks. Let's talk about checking your oil first and foremost. So step one, make sure your car is parked on level ground so that your oil level isn't this way or this way or this way or this way in your oil pan. So everything's pretty much static. You want to know where the dipstick is located in your car. If you don't, you can usually check your owner's manual and it'll give you a very good description of where to find it. Now, on older cars, we recommend that you, older being like pre-C4 maybe, pre-C5, check the engine oil when it's cold. Later cars, and I don't know if Corvettes did this later on, but a lot of manufacturers they actually changed the measuring point on their dipstick to compensate for a warm engine so that people didn't have to wait for their car to cool down to check their oil level. Not sure about Corvette, but just to be safe, measure it when cold. So here's the thing that you have to do. When you go, and forgive me, but there are people who don't know this, so bear with me. You pull the dipstick out. You take a clean cloth or a clean paper towel, wipe the dipstick down, put it back in, seat it fully, click, back into place, count to 3, then pull the dipstick out and read the level. When you look at a dipstick, especially a GM dipstick, there is a small section at the bottom of the dipstick that has what looks like cross-hatching, a bunch of little X's in a field. At the bottom end of the dipstick that goes into your oil pan, if your oil level comes up to the bottom of that crosshatch section, that means you're about half a quart low. If it comes to the middle of the crosshatch section, that means your oil is at the correct level. And if you are at the top end, closer to the handle of the crosshatch section, you're probably just a little bit over. Anything over the end of the crosshatch section, you're definitely overfilled. You're going to need to know the correct type and weight of the oil that your car takes. Again, find that in the owner's manual. Next thing is, when you're looking at your oil, sometimes you can tell it on the dipstick, other times during an oil change. It's very prevalent. So when oil is fresh, it is anywhere from almost clear to like light beer gold when it goes in. And any of those colors, great, when you check your dipstick. If it's light to medium brown, that means that the oil has some use on it, but is still mostly good. If it is dark like espresso, then it is getting to the point where the engine oil is probably reaching near the end of its life. Now, if you look at your oil and it looks like chocolate milk, i.e. a milky brown, that means you probably have coolant contamination in your oil, which is no bueno. How does that happen? Well, it means you probably have a blown head gasket or a cracked cylinder head. The danger there is that coolant mixes really well with oil. They like to mix up. The problem is coolant is a horrible lubricant, and the greater concentration of coolant you have in your oil, the less lubrication your engine is getting, and it can lead to premature engine wear, and in the worst cases, it can lead to complete engine catastrophe where you just destroy your engine. Anytime you see that chocolate milk, it needs immediate attention. Do not drive the car. Have it flatbedded to a mechanic to have it looked at. Next, you want to check your engine coolant. Now, in most modern Corvettes, everything basically 70s and up, on the reservoir itself where the coolant is stored that isn't currently in your radiator or your engine block, I've got one right here from a C5, okay? They are opaque. You can see through them, right? So when you're looking at it from the side, you can see where the fluid level is. Now, on a C5, and I actually took a marker and colored this in a little bit. Forgive me, I'm not good at coloring. Just so you could read it, they actually have where it says fill cold with an arrow at the top showing where that should be cold. So you're always going to check your fluid level when it is cold, because you never ever open this when you even think it might be hot. You also want to check the color of your coolant. Green coolant should be still quite green. The reddish, pinkish, Dexcool, orangish should be those colors. Anything other than that, where if it's a weird color, not one of those two colors, then something's wrong in your system. You also want to check when you're looking into your reservoir, if you see spots of oil, like you see in this picture here, that tells you that there is oil present in your coolant. Now, that also can mean a blown head gasket, or it could mean a leaking oil cooler inside of your radiator. But again, that is something that needs to be handled right away, because we don't want to be cross-contaminating those chemicals anywhere in your engine system. Also, I highly recommend that you test your coolant once a year with coolant test strips, so like little litmus tests that you can buy on Amazon or from an auto parts store. You just dip it in, it'll tell you if it's, too alkaline, too acidic, if there's other chemical intrusions in it, just kind of a quick health check for your coolant. Power steering fluid. Now, you locate your power steering fluid reservoir, usually somewhere at the front of the engine, and you will find a small dipstick, usually attached to the cap that goes onto that. So you unscrew the cap off of your power steering reservoir, and there's marks on here that say full, hot level, and then add here and below is add. I didn't color these, but they're embossed. You can't miss them. So you just take that, pick it up, wipe it off, put it back down, then pull it and get your reading. Once you have your reading, you know whether you need to add fluid. Also, power steering fluid, when it goes in, is clear. And if this power steering fluid is, again, dark, like black coffee or espresso, it's probably time to think about doing a power steering flush, because that means it's full of contaminants and it's done its best to keep the rest of your system from having to deal with them, but it only can do so much. When it's full, and then the contaminants end up particulating and coursing through your system, which is never a good thing. Brake fluid. Not a very important one here, because your life depends on your brakes. So this is something you definitely want to understand. You want to always be aware of your brake fluid levels. Again, just like the coolant reservoir, everything from like 84 and up has a opaque white plastic tank that you can look through to see where your fluid level is, and there will be high and low markers embossed on them. As long as you're in that level, you should be fine. The main thing is you want to check your color and your clarity. For those of you that don't know, brake fluid is hygroscopic, which means it absorbs moisture from the atmosphere, from wherever. And as it does so, it is going to begin to lose its clarity, because brake fluid almost looks like as clear as water when you put it in. If it starts to get cloudy, it starts to get, dark yellow, brown, black. As it gets darker, that's telling you, A, that it's absorbing more and more water, and it is absorbing more and more impurities in your system. Once you have just a 2% moisture intrusion into your brakes, then you are losing a lot of the boiling point of your brakes, which means it'll be easier for you to boil your brakes off. And when you boil the brake fluid in your system, then all of a sudden you lose your brakes completely. You push the pedal, nothing happens. We don't want that to happen. Now, there are also test strips and little electronic, look like pens that you can dip into your brake fluid that will tell you what your moisture percentage is. Anything 3% and above, time to get new brake fluid in, okay? And guys, believe me when I tell you, if you don't change out your brake fluid once you have that level of moisture intrusion, things are going to start happening to the internal components of your braking system. Your caliper bores, your wheel cylinders, your master cylinder, your costly ABS components, they can become pitted, resulting in sticking, binding, or seal leakage, in which case you're going to have a systemic problem that's going to be very expensive. So if you think there's water intrusion, or if you see that brake fluid's really dark, go ahead and change it. Clutch fluid, if your car has a manual transmission, almost the exact same parameters as what I talked about with the brake fluid, because you use the same fluid in both. And they have a little viewfinder on the side of that fluid reservoir right in front of the firewall, so you can see how much fluid's in there. If it's dark, time to change it. Washer fluid. Now, most people don't think of washer fluid as a safety issue. It's more of a convenience, right? No, not really, because if you are driving along and you get a splash of muddy water, or something something hits your windshield and goes kersplat and you can't see, that washer fluid is imperative, really important, to be able to clear your windshield so you can continue driving safely. So don't forego it, and don't just use water. You want to use actual washing fluid. Spend the $4 or $5 a gallon that you're going to use once a year and put the actual stuff in it. It's the best thing you can do for safety. Once you've gone through all of those fluids and you realize, okay, my pre-flight on the fluids is good, I'm ready to go, then you do two other things. Number one, take your tire pressure gauge and check your tire pressures all the way around the car. Now, I know that most modern Corvettes have tire pressure monitoring systems, but I still always check the tires themselves to make sure, A, that the system isn't giving me a false reading, and B, to make sure that the pressure is equalized all the way around. Easiest way to do this is to get a digital tire gauge that has a pressure relief valve on it. You can pick them up on Amazon for like 15, 18, 20 bucks, and they're nice, they work great. That way you can fill, and then with the gauge on it, you can attach it to the valve, and using the gauge release, you can step it down to get it right where you want it as far as PSI goes. Know your recommended PSI, what tire pressure the manufacturer recommends your tires should be at. That is on the sidewall of the tire. If you can't find it, it may be on the inside wall of the tire, but normally it's on both sidewalls. Check your tire treads while you're there. You want to make sure, from the tire treads you can see, make sure you don't see any nails or any debris stuck into the tread that could cause a leak. Also, look inside the treads and check the sidewalls for dry rot. Especially places with high UV like we have here in Florida, tires tend to go bad pretty quickly. In fact, in the state of Florida, you cannot sell somebody a set of tires used that is more than 6 years old, because it is such a problem down here. So I know that Alan just put up a picture showing you what dry rot looks like. If you see any of that, it is definitely time for tires. Finally, schedule this as part of your month, okay? Whether you choose to do it on the first of the month, when you choose to do it when your car payment's due, if you choose to do it the day that you wax your cat, whatever it may be, Get in the habit of doing this full pre-flight on your Corvette once a month on the same day of the month to where it becomes habit and it's just something that you do. There are very few things that you're going to be able to do for your Corvette, not being a mechanic, that will catch a problem before it becomes a big problem this way. So I hope you found this information useful. If you already knew all of this, good on you, but now it's up to you to stick to it and actually do this stuff. If you didn't know this stuff, let me know in the comments below. And if you have additional recommendations, by all means, please add them in the comments as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you soon.